I'm going to do a quick intro, although you don't need one, but for those of us that are
Thank you.
new here, I will do a quick intro and then I will leave you to it. So Dr. David Weiss is president and CEO of Weiss International, a Toronto-based firm specializing in innovation, leadership, and HR consulting for Fortune 500, social enterprise, and public sector organizations. David and his team of organizational consultants generate business, organizational, and people solutions for executives and boards globally. So I'm sure you're going to get into a little bit more about what you do, right, David? But you've
Absolutely.
authored a few books, I think, as well. Maybe you want to talk about that.
I will. Yeah, I'll absolutely mention it
Awesome.
after
Okay.
you
That's
finish the
that's
intro.
an amazing accomplishment. I think innovative intelligence is the one that I'm familiar with. Is
Correct.
that your most recent one?
No, it's not, but that one was translated in multiple languages and went viral. So
Yeah, that's
that's
the one I'm
definitely
familiar
related to
with.
the topic today.
So, well, we're happy to have you back and we're happy to have you here. And as always, we
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your time. So I will leave you to it because we're a couple minutes over, but
I
thanks again for being here. Oh,
just wanted to check your happy birthday.
oh, yeah, I know. My daughter was going to get really upset if I took it down, and I didn't feel like taking it down and then putting it back up. But yeah, it's her 8th birthday on Saturday. So we're trying
Oh,
to
bravo.
get the most out of this whole, pandemic birthday thing. So,
I love it. That's great. Happy
all
birthday
right.
to your daughter.
Thank you very much. All right. We'll
Yeah.
talk to you soon.
Great. Hi,
Thanks.
everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm David Weiss, and we're going to talk today about leading the innovative enterprise. So it's not just about leading innovation, which anybody in an organization should be responsible for doing, but there is some elements of how do you manage the system to lead innovation on a different kind of level. And we're going to be focusing on a couple of points in particular. So these are some of the things that we'll be showing. So leading the innovative enterprise is about, what are the 4 key elements that executives should focus on to govern innovation effectively. And I'll be walking you through that. I'll be working from the back of the room a little bit and showing you what these are, and hopefully it'll stimulate some thought and improve your contribution as a leader of the organization in small business, medium size, whatever business you're running. It makes a great deal of sense. And of course, keep thinking about how this applies to you. What's really important is not just to see this as a conference, but it's an application opportunity. So which nugget, which part of this actually would improve your game and actually give you the ability to create greater value as a very, very important issue in organizations to deliver greater innovation on an enterprise-wide level. A lot of what we're going to be dealing with, I've written a number of it. I keep on creating new ideas. But if you go to my firm's website at weissinternational.ca, the 5th tab over here has a tab called Free Articles. And I just highlighted a few of them. There's about 40 articles I wrote over there. Some of them based upon the book on the left, Innovative Intelligence. And the one about discovering the enterprise innovation question, that's one that I'll be referring to today. Also, the other one that I put a check mark, the call to proactively engage with an uncertain future. People are now dealing with so much uncertainty. There are some real neat, innovative processes that enterprises should be doing, and you as leaders of those enterprises probably should be considering as well. And so that's me, and there's a whole bunch of books that I've written, and ultimately it's a real pleasure to be here to share ideas with you. So let's talk about the 4 key elements that executives should focus on to govern innovation effectively. What we find is in our research, we found that 80% of executives are saying innovation is important. The question now is, who are those 20% who are not saying it's important? But this is in the top 5 of the critical issues that they need to address. 80% are finding that. This was repeated by Accenture, by McKinsey, by our research, by what we wrote in Innovative Intelligence. And it hovers between 25 to 35% are saying that they're satisfied with the level of innovation that they have. Now, of course, we're always anticipating that you always can get more, but that 50% distance is called an innovation gap. The gap between what they need and what they ultimately are satisfied with presently. And that has been very, very challenging to overcome. And there's some radical changes that are going on nowadays that really create even greater pressure for more innovation. During COVID, we really need to be innovative. And those that had a little bit of an opportunity to get ahead obviously did better in this kind of environment. That 80% is a big issue when you compare it to that 30%, and that's what we're talking about today. So we're going to look at these 4 key elements that executives should focus on to lead the innovative enterprise. And for the sake of this exercise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing this for a second, and I'm going to close my video for a second. I just put a flap down on the top, and I'm going to walk with you to the back of the room, because just to bring this one alive, I'm going to share with you how this actually looks from the perspective of these the innovative enterprise. So what we're really doing is we're trying to expose 4 different kinds of elements. And of course, it could be more, but let me capture them in this framework. So the first one that I tend to drive is the notion of we need to create leaders of innovation. And this is an important point, because what ends up happening is that we find that a lot of people are focusing on how do we create greater innovation and make our leaders more innovative. And that's actually, a very, very praiseworthy thing to try to do. But think about it for a minute. Your leaders, their age, I don't know, maybe some in the 30s, 40s, some 50s. They spent 30 years, 40 years, 50 years developing their cognitive capacity. They have a way of thinking. They're working in an organization. And you're asking the question, can I actually change their cognitive approach to become more innovative than they are just by virtue of, I don't know, telling them, or just by virtue of, giving them a course for a few days? The likelihood you're going to rewire their brain that rapidly is unlikely. Malcolm Gladwell said, it takes 10,000 hours to learn things, and really, which is 5 years. You're right. You give me someone for 5 years, I'll transform their cognitive capacity, possibly, to become more innovative. So we've been spending a lot of time learning tricks and games to try to make someone more innovative. But if you think about it for a second, and this is probably one of the big nuggets that come out of innovative intelligence, that one of the reasons why it went viral was the notion that we can't actually expect people, if we didn't hire them as being highly innovative, to all of a sudden transform to becoming innovative. But what we can do is create leaders of innovation. So what that means is that we need to develop leaders not to become more innovative themselves. Not that we don't do it, but that is not the focus. But the focus is, how do we get leaders to know how to work with individuals and teams, and diverse teams especially, to draw out their innovative capacities. So it's a leader who pulls out that innovation. And the idea is there that if they are effective at pulling out from a diverse team all their innovative capacities that each one has, whatever level they can contribute, to gain insight into issues, to really understand what the real problems are, to discover innovative solutions, to iterate whenever you need to iterate, especially in design thinking as a key tool of innovation, then they are the proper leader that can draw out that capability. Now, what I'll suggest to you, that a leader of innovation, needs knowledge and needs experience, but that could get in the way sometimes of the leader who ultimately is in a listening mode and drawing it out. So that facilitation, that team coaching will generate much more inventive, much more innovative ideas than you might have had if you just had some brilliant innovators. Now, a great innovator is wonderful. It's great if you have them. They could be really crucial. But sometimes they get in the way of other people being able to express whatever they can in innovation. It's like, I can't share an idea with that person. They're just too smart, too bright. And then we're losing assets in the process. So what you really need to do is we need to develop leaders of innovation, leaders who can draw out the innovative capacities of individuals and teams. Interestingly enough, we found in our research on this is that emotional intelligence is an important characteristic of being someone who has innovative intelligence. In other words, the ability to be a leader of innovation. Because to be a leader of innovation, you have to have the humility to be able to say, you know, I don't necessarily know the answer. It may come from other people, and we're going to be able to pull it together by integrating the various reflections to gain insight and discover innovative solutions. So I have to have an emotional maturity about me, and actually allow conflict to emerge in a healthy way, rather than being nervous about when people disagree and say maybe you're all saying the same thing. The leader of innovation doesn't say maybe you're saying all the same thing, try to make peace. What they do say is, wait a second, maybe you're saying something different from each other. Let's draw out the difference. Maybe that difference has a nugget in it that will give us an advantage in understanding this issue in a different way and coming up with some kind of solution. So number one key characteristic is that we need to be focusing on building leaders of innovation even more than building innovative leaders. That's a key element in executives to drive that kind of notion. So, they can learn how to do this, you can teach it. And one way to really get it going is give them a real complex problem that you are focusing on, get a diverse group of leaders, and get them to collaborate as leaders of innovation to try to gain insight and discover innovative solutions. Maybe even bring it below your executive level so that you can unleash that talent. You'll see engagement will skyrocket because they finally feel like they're being heard and their ideas are being brought forward, and you'll be able to shift that kind of mindset through those kinds of approaches. Now, imagine now we have that. We have leaders of innovation at the executive table. We have leaders of innovation broadly. It's not only people who are people managers, but anyone who's leading projects. They all need to have the capacity to be leaders of innovation. What else can you do as a leader, as an executive, to lead the innovative enterprise? And that comes to this box over here and this box over here. So this box over here is what we do most of the time. And that one is, how do we get organizational practices that actually make innovation easier, that make innovation easier? Now, what's interesting about this one, and now this is a systemic one, where we're now asking the question of, we have tons of organizational practices. We have practices, we pay people. So we pay people individually. We promote people. We promote them individually. We actually give them benefits. We give them options. We give them, so we do a lot for the individual. But if in fact innovation, as leaders of innovation, occurs mostly in a team environment that is diverse, to what extent are we leveraging our organizational practices as a way to motivate cross-functional collaboration, motivate diverse teams collaborating well, motivating even people bringing the customer or the suppliers into your thinking teams to work on this? Most of the motivations are driven off of the individual performance. We need to balance that out. So we need organizational practices, which are essentially some levers that will motivate people to behave differently. We need these organizational practices to actually contribute more significantly to driving the ability to be a leader of innovation that works with diverse teams to draw out the innovative capacities of those teams to gain insight and discover innovative solutions to these very complex problems we're facing. But another thing is important on the organizational practices, and that is many of them might have been created already. Rules, financial rules, HR rules, various kinds of standards, rules, who's allowed to do what, who's not allowed to do what. And they often aren't created with a lens of what is the impact on that rule for innovation. And as an executive, as a leader of the innovative enterprise, it's incumbent upon you to ask that question. What are we doing that, in fact, may be a rule that we've created, a policy, a standard that we've created without the thought of what the impact is on innovation. For example, many people for years under the quality initiative were driving ISO. Now, ISO, the principle in ISO is get it right the first time. What happens in a world where we want to use design thinking, where iteration becomes the dominant theme? Where all of a sudden we're saying that we need minimal viable products and we need you to go out to customers, early adopt customers and share it with them, and actually it won't be right. We know it won't be right, and we'll be looking for their feedback to ultimately make it better. So if you start thinking about that one, that's very, very interesting, because all of a sudden people say, wait a second, you don't ever launch it, the waterfall technique, unless you get it right the first time. Then we'll never get it right, because the customer, it's so ambiguous at this point. The customer has to help us almost in a co-creation mode to be able to get it right. But are our standards creating certain policies and rules that are actually working against what we really need people to do as design thinkers and create that innovative enterprise? I actually did that with a organization, a finance organization, where we put up all of their rules and regulations around the room when the days when we actually met physically. And we did that, and we looked at it and we said, let's consider what these rules and regulations do to the process of innovation. And what we found was the certain timelines by which they needed to get a return on certain investments that finance was driving through its algorithms. What ultimately came about was that did not fit the actual work that was going on in innovation. Didn't work, because innovation incubates for longer. It doesn't show a return. It stays under the radar for a long, long time, and then eventually it could break through and ultimately get a certain kind of success. And that's why incumbent organizations, by and large, are unsuccessful against the new entrants, because the new entrants don't have these rules and regulations, and the incumbents do, and that kind of encumbers them from really being innovative. So we need to make sure not only that we put organizational practices in place that support our innovations, that actually support the processes that we need, we also have to look and dismantle a number of the policies and regulations and procedures that we have that in fact get in the way, that actually inadvertently, it wasn't intended. You go to HR and they got clear roles and responsibilities. People say, define my job description. And the answer is, wait a second, to be an innovative enterprise, I need you to be willing to, be multi-skilled, to contribute to multiple places at different times, to work on diverse teams and not get locked into one particular role. Other organizations, if you have collective bargaining situations where the rules are tightly defined, they sometimes find it was created in a mindset where people had jobs within a specific enterprise, and that was it. But that doesn't work anymore within the innovative space. If your organization says you've got silos, well, that means you're probably not going to be able to work cross-functionally. I'd attack that. That's a major symptom that can get in the way. What are the practices that are put in place that actually encourage that? That's what the organizational practices are. So this is our levers that we can use to make that change. This side over here is actually a culture that innovates. I used to say a culture of innovation, but the reality is that a culture of innovation is really hard to find. You end up getting this culture, I'll just rewrite it a little bit darker, that innovates. Because, I was working with one organization which was, that innovates, one organization which was a foundation for a major healthcare organization. And they raised money and they said, we want to have an innovative culture. And after a while, we realized, no, we don't. We're a foundation. We want to have a donor-driven culture, but we want to have a culture that allows in our donor-driven culture to be highly innovative. So we then said we need a culture that innovates. Whatever is your dominant culture. Maybe you need a customer focus driven culture. Maybe you need a product development culture. But whatever it is, we need that culture to actually enable innovation. So if we think about organizational practices, as organizational practices is the piece that we use and put in place policies and regulations to actually create motivations for people to do things. This culture that innovates is actually what people do and say when no one is looking. So what that means is that we're dealing with how do they self-motivate? How do the peers motivate each other? How do they actually work in a way that will drive the behavior? Sometimes, they talk about Drucker's comment that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Sometimes it's lunch. It varies in terms of the meal. But if you think about what that's about, it's because culture is so deep. It's like group personality is the way that Edgar Schein calls it. And when you think about that kind of culture, it's so deep that if you try to change it, it's going to cause a lot of anxiety. So even if you have a great strategy, we decided this is our new direction, people will say, you know what? I don't know how to play that game. I'm going to fight it. We've got to actually work on the levers that will allow people to modify what they do and what they say when no one is looking. What's happening right now while you're in this session and you have employees back in the enterprise that you're leading? Are they working, because they're self-motivated? So this is how you externally motivate, that organizational practices. This is how they operate when they are self-motivated. And actually, one of the key motivators to get people to think about a culture of innovation is how does the executive work? So for this one, I think that there's a whole bunch of things to consider, but one of them is executive team modeling. That if in fact your executive team is an example of a culture that innovates, if your executive team is an example of leaders of innovation, then ultimately it's likely other people will watch that and it'll work. Think about it for a second. It's an interesting observation. Think about how this works. In most organizations, if I've got my purchasing and I've got my operations and I've got my marketing and I got my sales and I got my service and they operate as separate departments, and if I try to put a cross-functional team together there, I am running it without authority. So I'm the head of sales, but I'm running a group that's cutting across. So that's a bit of a challenge. I don't have the authority to say you better behave, you better not. But you as the president of this organization, you have each of those, let's assume they're VPs, as direct reports. So you have an added advantage to have the cross-functional team of the executive team work well. You are the example of a cross-functional team, of a diverse cross-functional team. And why? Because you have the advantage that you have an authority structure that can tell people what to do and hire and fire them for that matter. If that group is not working well, people in your organization watch you and they say, if you can't do it, and you got the advantage that you all report in there, how do you expect me to be able to do it when they have to listen to me out of goodwill? And they can't. So executive team modeling becomes really crucial. And that becomes something that's really important. So you could be a leader of the innovative enterprise if you make your executive team an example of a diverse team that is able to gain insight and discover innovative solutions. And that filters through the organization. The last one, which is down here, is essentially you need to have what I call an innovation plan. What an innovation plan is, it's part of a strategic plan. But what it basically is doing is, a lot of times when we talk about strategy, we talk about strategy as this is what we plan to do over the next 3 years, over the next 5 years. These are our early, lead indicators and how we'll do it. But when we talk about an innovation plan, we are thinking about what are the possible ideas or eventualities that might occur where we don't have the answer, but we have the question. So I was working with an insurance company, and that insurance company was dealing with the issue of, we have a lot of auto insurance, and that's what we do. We do a lot of auto insurance, a lot of life insurance. What happens if the ability of self-driven cars actually really does take off? What will that do to our business? How do we actually deal with that? So they didn't have the answer, but how do we migrate to be successful in that world? Another organization also in that space was working through brokers all the time. And their question was, what if our business goes the way of the travel agencies? And all of a sudden, instead of working through brokers, people are actually purchasing insurance in our space directly from the insurance company. Will we be able to participate if we don't have the broker network between us? Because that's the way we've always done it. But now we have to be able to operate in a new ecosystem, in a new world where things will be operating quite differently. So you build in what is that one or two key question that you need to address. I was working with a healthcare organization and they were struggling with, we need to do great healthcare, but then they asked the question, how do we actually transform our relationships throughout the healthcare network so that the right people come into emergency and we see ourselves as part of a larger continuum of healthcare? Are we ready for that to be part of that ecosystem of health, or are we still just an isolated piece within it? And what would that look like? And they didn't have the answer. So within the strategy, they generated that innovation question as a key feature. So 4 key elements become really crucial. Number 1, focus on leaders of innovation rather than innovative leaders. It'll make a massive difference, and you'll see people will be relieved. There'll be a big sigh of relief. Instead of saying, I need you to be more innovative, which they know they can't do, to being, I need you to be leaders of innovation. Number 2, check your organizational practices. What are you doing as your organizational practices to drive innovation systemically? And what are you doing in innovation practices that are actually inadvertently getting in the way of innovation? What are you doing in your HR, finance, even legal? I mean, all these various things. Are you going too far? I was working with an accreditation body, and their question was, are we over-accrediting and we making things too difficult? Are we over-regulating and therefore limiting innovation? Becomes a real critical issue. Number 3, what are the key levers we can have to build a culture that innovates? What are we doing as an executive team to model that? Do we have a track record on this side that actually when people come up with innovative ideas, they actually get implemented? Because it loses momentum, the culture will be killed of innovation if people believe that it's just a waste of time, nothing ever happens anyway. And finally, make sure that you articulate and publicize to your employees, let them all know, and get your diverse teams working on it. What are those 2 or 3 critical questions that you might be facing over the next 3 years? Can you now get some early jump on that to start thinking through how you might deal with that innovation question? Now, I mentioned to you a few moments ago that on the Weiss International website, under the free articles, there's an article on how to identify the innovation question. Feel free to read that. There's some stuff on culture. There's a lot of material on being leaders of innovation that I've done, as well as on how to deal with complexity in a COVID environment. You're all invited to do that, and I hope you have a wonderful conference. It's been a pleasure sharing these ideas with you. You obviously have a critical role in creating that innovative enterprise, and I wish you great success in making it happen. Thank you very much. I'll come back to the table.
David, hi, it's Jesse.
Hi, Jesse. Good to see you again.
You as well. I just wanted to come on to thank you for the presentation. It's always great having you at these events.
Oh, well, it's really great. Here I am. I'm back again. See, we were back there over there.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I did catch, about half of it. So really some definitely workable points that you made, especially on like running diverse teams that lead to innovation. That was really great. So I do.
How many people? How many? I couldn't tell how many people were there.
It looks to be now people are leaving for the next session starting up. So there's about 5 people here. But
okay. Are there any questions that are left from anybody over here?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat.
Yeah, I still have Sean from Newmarket saying.
Yeah. Yeah, so Sean's session is actually coming up after this. So
okay, great.
Yeah, David, I would want to I want to recommend putting your contact info in the chat here so people can contact you if they want. Your website, your LinkedIn, your email if you'd like, and
let me do that. That'd be great.
Sure.
So yeah, that'd be a pleasure. And here we go. I'll put it in there right now. 1 second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to anyone in the chat, if you do have any questions for David, if you do want to reach out to him, have a chat, I'm sure he'd be happy to do that. So feel free to contact him. Okay?
Okay, 1 second. It'll go in the chat right now. Here we are. And let's see, tell me this shows up or not.
Yep. There we go. Weiss International,
Okay.
and then your email. Perfect.
Yeah. And I don't know if we have anybody left on the call on this one. Are they gone?
We still have a couple people left.
Okay, so just to, for those who are wanted that article, Discovering the Enterprise Innovation Question, I'll actually put in the chat as well. So you can see what that looks like, and you can just click on it and download it. Just it's around that innovation plan idea. So you can do that and enjoy it. It's quite a cool piece. It's in English and French. So that's also
perfect.
nice.
There we go. Nice and bilingual.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So again, thanks for coming out today, both to everyone in the chat and to you, David, as well. We have 2 sessions coming up after this. We've got Sean Stephan's session, so he was in the chat here. He's from Tree Frog. He'll be talking about the importance of branding to generate new leads. And we've got Francisco Romolino's session also coming up on how to help your clients in times of financial crisis. So I hope to see everyone there. And David, again, thanks so much, and I'll be signing off for now.
Yeah. And I'll be going to the networking now, just to chat with anybody who wants to talk. So I'll talk to 2 or 3 people, and then I'll go. All the best to you.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.